Hey guys, welcome to the stream. I started up a new project in Unreal 5 and the shaders are compiling, which is a bit of a bummer really. Tell you what we'll do. What we'll do is hopefully I'm going to open another project. I'm going to keep it to a project that's basically got nothing in it, but hopefully we can do something that is like this one, 5.1. Right, we can go into that, Jess, right? I won't show you directly how to do it, but I will give you enough that you'll be able to do it, if you know what I mean. Right? So let's open up this project and hope that it works. If not, we're just going to have to wait on it. Either way, if I have to open up a 4.27, I will, but they work in exactly the same way. There's nothing different about 4.27 to 5 in this regard. Hopefully we can get a 5.1 open. Don't have to wait on the shaders for this new project, even though it's coming down. But let's talk about this, right, in Unreal Engine 5, right? Or Unreal Engine any version. Right, now there is a video, as you guys will know, on enumerators and structures in my playlist for Unreal Engine Basics. Now we're going to expand on it a little bit so that it really becomes useful. Okay, now structures on their own are obviously very useful, and we can expand on their usefulness. And normally the way, if I were to teach this, and I've done it before on other streams, but this seems to be something that people don't get, right? I point them to the structures thing, and they kind of go, oh yeah, okay, and never use it. Or use it simply for example, character stats, okay? Like health, hunger, you know, whatever main stats, depending on the game they've got. Hit points, magic points, maximum magic points, blah blah. Okay, so these are the things that we'd normally incorporate into like a structure within Unreal Engine. Okay, but what you can also do is then create a data table. And a data table can then store preset, what you could consider preset structures. Okay, which is basically, this is particularly pointed at Sunbuster, think of it as a record set, right? An SQL record set, or in Visual Basic. I noticed he pointed that out earlier, where in the database you have a record. That record represents a structure, right? So basically when you return a record set, it fills in the structure, and then basically the character then takes on those items of data. Okay, so let's say you've got a structure that has, you know, your health, your mana, your speed, right? Think of it this way. Your data table will store the default settings for, like, let's say a magician, right? So a magician starts with 100 mana, 10 health, 25 speed. That'll be stored in the data table as that structure. For a rogue, let's say they have 10 mana, 15 hit points, 75 speed. Again, that would be another row in the data table with that structure. Okay, and when you load up the character, you basically say, give me the data from that data table for the rogue. Then it'll automatically fill in the data, and Bob's your uncle, you will have the stats of a rogue. Now, if we expand on that, we can then say, what about the mesh? Well, that can be stored in the structure, which in turn can be stored in the data table. So, for example, for Jess wants character selection. Let's say you were selecting a rogue, a warrior, or a mage. Right? If the person selects the warrior, you basically say, okay, go and find in the data table the structure for a warrior. Right? You return those things back. Don't worry, we're going to go over this when this eventually loads the bloody shaders up, right? And basically, you set the mesh to the mesh that it returns, you set the health to the health, you set the mana to the mana, you set the speed to the speed. Right, so that will automatically do that, right? As I've said, don't worry, we're going to talk about this first while the shaders go, and then I'll show you how to do it. The next bit is, say it wasn't a character selection, say it was a random monster. Right, okay. Well, we can do the exact same thing. We can create a monster and we can make it random. So we can create a blueprint that when it's triggered, it basically says, go and get me a random monster. And say we've got 10 monsters in our data table with all their structures, all their meshes, all their health, all their attacks, all their stuff. We can basically say, go and get me this structure, fill in the mesh, fill in the health, fill in the monster details, and spawn it. So we can create a random monster spawner. Okay? And we can expand it as far as we want, because a structure can be made of structures. Okay? So we could split it down further and say, okay, we aren't going to have our character stats with a mesh. Say we want to break that down. We could have the character has a structure, right, that is broken down into 2 more structures. It's all types of data, right? But the data will be put into variables. Yes, it can be anything. You can have materials, you can have vectors, you can have other structures, right? So we can create a structure that is made up of 2 other structures. Okay, so we could have an appearance structure, we could have a behavior structure, we could have a stats structure. So the appearance structure would be made up of, let's say, the mesh, any special materials, any special effects or stuff like that. We could have the behavior structure, which would have our AI controller, blackboards, behavior trees, etc., etc., what type of behavior it exudes. Then we could have the stats, which would be just our basic stuff like health, mana, blah blah blah. Then we can have a weapon structure. Now think of it this way, right? We have a random monster spawner, but we could have a weapon spawner, right? And we could basically have a type of weapon, the mesh, the range, the ammo it uses, all in a structure. And again, we could have it set up in the same way that we could have a monster spawner, we could have a weapon spawner, and all they do is basically create the base weapon or the base monster. They go to the data table, they select a random line of data, and basically fill in that data into our base weapon or monster, right? And this is something that I use extensively for everything. The other thing is, if you want a Excel spreadsheet, or in this case Sunbuster for you or any of the coders out there, if you want a multi-dimensional array, you cannot do that in Unreal Engine unless you use a structure, right? And you have an array of structures, and that's how you do a multi-dimensional array in Unreal Engine. Okay, so the advantage of structures is you can save data in a data table that's directly related to a structure. That structure can be made up of anything you like. It can be made up of meshes, skeletal meshes, AI, every type of actor you can think of, right? Static meshes, can be made up of hierarchical meshes, it can be made up of even just simple variables, booleans, integers, whatever it is, can make up anything, can make up a structure. Even, and as I said before, you can make up a structure of many other structures. Okay, so what I was saying before was you could have an appearance structure which would store the mesh, any color, sort of grades, all of that stuff, right? You can have the, then you can, as I said, you can go as far as you like. You can have appearance structures. Now, anybody with SQL knowledge would look at this and say, okay, we could actually make lookup tables. So, for example, you could have eye color, right? An eye color lookup table. So, when you're designating the appearance of a character, you can then go and get a random color of eyes from the lookup table, right? So maybe it's got 10 different colors: blue, green, yellow, black, brown, blah, 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 right? And we're going to go into some of that once these shaders are done. Oh my god, it's went up again. And that's because it's now doing the CPP thing as well. Ah, god damn it. Oh well, anyway, we'll do this for as long as it takes, right? So, we can look at data tables as if they're SQL. Or, if you've got database knowledge, you will know, basically, once you've seen it done once or twice, it'll make perfect sense, okay? You can't use SQL, obviously, but it does kind of work in the same way, okay? planning movement patterns, yes, you could do this, right? Personally, I have done this, but it was for a very specific scenario, okay? Where it was a tower defense game, and the monsters moved from point A to point B to point C to point D to point E, where A and E were the start and end, right? But I wanted them to follow a particular route around a particular point, right? So I was using an amalgamation of the AI and target points. But yes, you could easily set up target points and then basically set up those target points and tie them to data in a data table, right? Where the target points had a vector, right? So you could save basically the vector, right? And then transfer them across to a target point, okay? So let's say a target point had, instead of actually placing it on the map, now it would, obviously it's quite hard to think up on the spot situations where you would do this, right? But say you did anyway, but say you did use it in some way like this, what you would do is basically give your target point a tag. The tag would be the number in the data table that related to the row, so it was a very specific vector, and then you could save that, okay? And then basically you could just put a target point anywhere on the map, give it that tag, and it would get moved to the correct position of the vector in the data table, right? So basically what I'm going to give you is the tools to then expand on whatever your logic or your game needs, okay? Yes, Sunbuster, I used a mix of both AI and specific target points, right? So if it basically hit target point A, it would set the next target point to be B, but it would use the AI to move between A and B, because B would then become the new movement target. Then obviously when it passed B, it would get moved to C. The AI would now have an updated destination point, which would be C. Then so on and so forth. It would gradually move through them, right? But I used an amalgamation of both. Now, I don't think I used a data table for that, but there's no reason why I couldn't, right? It was just it was easy just to put the target points on the map, right? But if you wanted to configure it in a data table, which is a lot easier to actually do with some things, like for example, if you're setting up healths, if you're setting up behaviors or whatever, it's obviously easier just to go through a data table than try and select particular monsters and select every single monster of that type and then change the health on it. Whereas if you've got this data in a data table, you only need to change it in one place and it changes everything, right? So we can take a look at that, but as I said, these are the basic foundations of how you get to the next level in Unreal Engine, right? If you've glossed over structures and you've glossed over enums and think, oh, they look quite good, but never use them, then you really are skipping over some of the most important building blocks. No, ask away, Sunbuster. We're sitting here watching shaders get done, so, Well, we're nearly there. 292. So we're about to get going. Right, I'm going to take a quick break to go to the toilet, and once we come back, hopefully this will be done and we'll get started. Okay? So back in a second. Okay, Hi Mr. Spot, we're doing a bit of a tutorial today, something a bit different. Right, we don't need to wait in the shaders for this because we're basically working on other things. Right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new folder and let's call it structures. Okay, and in here we got a blueprint, and let's actually create a new folder and let's use all the tools at our disposal. So we'll create an enumeration, and I've completely ballsed that up, but we'll fix it in a minute. And we'll call this E class. Okay, now this class is not Unreal Engine class, we're talking about an RPG. You can't, but what you can do is you can go to which one is it again? Might be, is it tools, debug, widget reflector, and change this to 1.3. that should make it a bit bigger. Hopefully that helps you guys. Right, so in this case class is going to be, well, let's just set it up, will we? Right, and we're going to use wizard. Okay, we'll see, we'll just add 4. Warrior. Just think of this as your character selector. Right, so we've got wizard, warrior, rogue, and we will have, I don't know, let's think Diablo, shall we? Call it necromancer. Right, so we've got an enumerator with these 4 values in it, right? So what we'll do now is create a new folder, and we'll call it enumerators, and we shall plonk this in here. Right, so we've got an enumerator that's going to store the class of the character. Okay, so next thing we need is a structure. So we're going to create it in structures, and we're going to say structure, and we're going to call it struct class. Okay, so let's keep it simple to start with. We'll add a variable, and we shall basically have E-class. Now we're not setting up data here, we're just setting up the structure, remember, okay? So we're going to say class, let's say hit points, let's say speed, let's say mana. And then let's say mesh. Okay, so our hit points, we'll make it an integer, keep it simple, integer, and that's going to be skeletal mesh. And here's our skeletal mesh. And there we go. Okay. So next, in here, and I'll keep this all separated for you guys, right? You want to do it how you do it, how you want to split it up into folders. You can have an overall enums and overall structures, or you can have it under a particular character and then have enums and structures under that. It's up to you how you do it, right? So let's say we're going to have chars, right? And in here we're going to create a blueprint, right? And let's say it's going to be a character. So we'll call it BP underscore base char, right? So we'll open that up. Right, hopefully this will open soon. Now, by the way guys, this is useful for me as well, right? Because I know how to do this a million times, right? But it's always good to practice these things, even if you've done it X amount of times before, because it just cements in your mind how to go about doing this. Right, so creating an enum, creating structures, creating data tables, creating a character, getting it all set up. The more you do this, the more it will make sense, the easier it will become, the faster you can do it, and the more ideas come into your head that you can then implement, okay? So it's never a bad idea to even just do this out of curiosity to see if you can get something to work, okay? So in our variables for our base character, right, we're going to say s main, let's call it s main data, right? And it's going to be of the type struct class, right? We can compile that. Now instantly, delete these, we'll leave the begin play, right? Because we're going to use that, right? But we are going to turn that off, right? And it's going to brighten up as soon as we actually do something with this, right? But you'll notice here, when we drag this in, oopsie daisy, drag this in, right, we can literally split the pin, and there are all the things that are in our structure, okay? Now the other way we can do this, and usually the better way to do it, we don't want to do that. The better way to do this is basically to break it. And that gives us the same thing, right? But then we can hide unconnected pins, and that's going to keep it tidier. Okay? But we're going to delete that for now. We are going to come back to it, and we are going to do it again, but I'm just basically showing you the basics. So now what we need is data, because we haven't done any data yet. So what we'll do is we'll create a new folder and we'll call it datatables. Okay? Open that up, right click, go to miscellaneous and go data table. Now notice it asks us to use a structure. Well, we've got a structure that we want to use and it's called struct class. Okay, that. So we can call that DT and we call it base class. Okay? We can open this up and you'll notice it's got class, hit point, speed, mana and mesh. Okay? And what we can now do is add a row. We can set up its class. So that's going to give us a choice of wizard, warrior, rogue or necromancer. Right? So we can now set the hit points for this is going to be the wizard. Right? His speed is going to be 20. Let's say his mana is going to be 100. And we can set up a mesh. Okay? Then we can do another one. We can set up the warrior. His hit point is going to be 50. His speed is going to be, let's say 15. Let's say his mana is 0. Okay? And we can set up whatever. So let's just do that. And then basically we can do the other two. So we can do one for the rogue. And the last one's going to be the necro. Then we can set up hit points for this, right? So 15, 12, 0. And then we can just set up anything for this. So we'll just put in skeletal cube. Doesn't really matter, right? For this particular purpose, we've got our necro, right? We can say hit points. This is the necro, so we'll say 14. Speed is 14. Mana, let's say 75. And let's set up him as SK Mannequin. Okay? So, that's us. We've got our base data. Okay? So, we've got our base data. We can go to content. We can go to chars. We can drag a character in. Right? But, it doesn't do anything. Well, we've not set anything up yet, right? So, we can do a couple of things here. But we're going to take it and we're going to randomize it. And then we're going to look at something a little bit different, okay? Doing it so that we can actually set it up either randomly or not. Okay, so you'll notice if I press play here, nothing's there, right? We've not got anything, okay, which is fine, we know that already, but what we'll do is let's move this. Let's move our character. Wherever it is. Right? So there is our character. And so that we know where it is, right, we'll plonk it up here. Okay, if we hit the end key, that'll drop it down to hit the thing. Okay, so we know where our character is. It's on the corner up this ramp. Okay, again, just to make sure that nothing happens, there's nothing there. Okay. Now the other thing is, let's do that again. But what I'm going to do with our BP character, right, is I'm going to make this visible so that we can see it and we can see what the values are, right? So when we do the outliner, we can actually see default. We can see that these are nothing. Okay, now it's going to show us the same thing if we select our character. Nothing. Okay, it's just the default wizard which has to be set. No hit points, no speed, no mana, no mesh. Okay? Now, what we want to do now is, on begin play, we want to read what we have done, and we want to set it to the value in here. Okay, we can randomize this later, but what we're going to do is we're going to use this to set everything else up. Okay, so we need to read the data table. So what we can say is get data table row names. Okay, now this selects, unless we know the row name, we have to basically iterate through the whole data table, right? And I'll show you how to do that in a second. Right? So we select our data table, which is base class. Right? Then we do for each. And then what we do is with a break. Okay, because once we've found our data, we don't want it to continue. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is get data table row. Okay, and it's going to be the same table. So basically we're iterating through the table to find a value. Okay, now you'll notice here the out row is going to be our struct class. Okay, now if anybody's got any questions, start asking. Remember, this data table is made up of the structure class, and that's the exact values it's going to bring back. Okay, now what we can do here is we can pull in our main data, then we can break the struct, right, and we can compare the class. We can say if that equals our class in our actual what? Right, well, we're not doing that then. we say equals that, then we're going to fill out our data from this. Now, what I was saying earlier about breaking the struct, we can now do that, and that's now a lot tidier, right? So, what we can do is now say branch. Okay. So basically what this doing is saying, if we've found the row in the data table with this value, then we do something. Okay? Otherwise, we just want to loop to the next one until we find that value. Okay? Now, otherwise, what we can do is we can say set the main data is equal to that. Okay? Right. Now, theoretically, the most efficient way to do this is then to break here. Ah, god damn it. Right, the easiest way to do this probably is to do a reroute node, because I'm going to have to do one anyway. Right, so we do that, and we put that into break. Okay, so basically when we've found our data, we don't need to iterate anymore, so we just break out of the for next loop or the for each loop, depending on how you've done it. Right? Now, we are not complete yet, but we kind of are, in a way. So we've compiled that, and watch these values, right? Press play, base class, there is our stuff. Okay? If we press stop, we've got that selected. We select our warrior and press play. We've got 50, 15, 0. Jess, this is exactly what I'm doing. You can literally change a value here and the whole thing changes when you begin play. If you can't implement that into a selection screen, I don't know what to say. Right, so you'll notice that these values are changing, but the problem is that we don't have a mesh. Right? It's not got a mesh. Why has it not got a mesh? Well, simply enough, on the completion, all we do is drag that in, and say set scale apparently. Right. Okay, I'm guessing it's that then. And all we do is basically grab this, damn it, keep hitting Control W because I'm used to Unreal Engine 4. Right, and on here we basically put that there, then hide unconnected pins. Compile that, press play, and there is our mesh. Right, we can stop that, we can change that to the wizard, we can press play, there is our different mesh. Right, we can change this to the rogue, press play, and we've got a cube. Right, go to Necromancer, press play, there's our skeletal mesh. Right, so there's one way to do it. Okay, but say we don't want to do it from selecting the class here, right? Say we wanted, see for example these were the monsters, right? And we had the 4 types of monsters, right? We don't have monsters, we have characters, right? So your enemies are going to be the Necromancer, Warrior, Rogue or Wizard, okay? But we don't necessarily want to select the one that we want. We want it to do its own thing. Okay, well, we can kind of do the same thing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and then what we're going to do is we're going to split it so that we can actually decide which one we're going to do, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to get the length of this, right? And then we're going to take away 1, and that's going to give us a value between 0 and the maximum number in the array. Okay, now if we were to look at, I'm going to compile this for now to explain this. If we're to look at our data table, we're going to have 4 records, okay, in an array when we get the data table row names back, okay? But it's going to be 0, 1, 2, and 3, okay? So it's going to give us a length of 4 because there's 4 records, but we take away 1 because the records are numbered between 0 and 3. Okay, so that is why we take away 1. Okay, and then what we do is we say get random range. Might not probably not a random. We want a random integer in range. And it's going to be from 0 to this number here. Then we're going to get a copy of this, and the index that we want is the random number. Okay? And then we're going to plug this in here. We're going to delete that because we don't need to loop. We're getting the number directly. Okay? We're going to move this to the end. Because once we have got our stuff, we just want to fill the data in. Okay, so we basically go to there, and this goes to here. And we can delete this, and funnily enough we can basically do that, right? And that is going to work just the same, except we are not selecting this anymore, right? What we're doing is getting a random one. Okay, we can compile that, and if we press play, you'll see what it's selected for us. It's selected the necromancer. Press play again. It has selected, interesting. Interesting. So it's basically not working for some reason. Which is interesting, I suppose. Let's see what's going on, shall we? Ah, no, that's okay. Right. So let's find out what's going on, shall we? Value 3. Value 2. So it says neuro underscore 2, right? So step over. Ah, we don't need this. Right, okay, as you can see there, a little bit of debugging soon solves the problem. We don't need that anymore because we're directly picking one. I'm going to undo that, disable that. Now the next thing we're going to do, so there we go, it has randomly selected the wizard. We press play again. It has selected the necromancer, filled in the data, updated the mesh, and it's ready to go. Now what we can do here is we can select more than one, and the point of this is that we should start getting like different, you'll notice this one is different for this one. We've got two characters, one is a warrior, the next one's a rogue. So we have fundamentally now started creating a random spawner. Right, we've got 3 different now. Right? You can now, we've got a warrior, we've got a rogue, and we've got a necromancer. Okay? So, say we were doing this for our level designer, right? Well, it's okay to say, well, you know, this is all well and good, but sometimes I want to pick and sometimes I don't, right? Well, we can put that in for our lovely level designer. What we can do is we can add a variable in here and we can say spawn random. Okay, it is a boolean. Okay, we're going to make it editor visible. We can now, well, we want to keep this visible, right? We can pile that back up, and what we can do is in our base character we've now got a spawn random. We can click that, we can select that one, but let's leave this one right, let's leave that, but always spawn him as a wizard, right? So what we can now do is pull in our spawn random, right? We get it, and we branch off it. Now we say if it's spawn random, we do that. If it's not spawn random, we do that. Then we can plug that in there, and that's it. We now have our designer is able to decide if they want a random monster or a random character, or in the middle's case, we always want to spawn whatever's in here. Right, so now you'll see it that when we run this and stop it a few times, these will change, but this one will always stay the same, right? So character 1, we have the necromancer. Now, if everything works properly, character 2 should be the wizard, which it is. Character 3 is a rogue. If we stop it and we run it again, that's our wizard. Our outside ones, we've got the necro. 2 is going to be the wizard. 3 is a rogue. We can stop it. We can run it again, and notice we've got a cube, we've got our wizard, and we've got whatever that is, our warrior. Okay, middle one is always the wizard, we know that, because basically we've set it up. This is spawning randomly, so that's going to decide that. So there, we've passed the functionality to the designer so that they can either just spawn anything they want out of that data table, right? Or they can decide if they want it to spawn a particular type of character, right? So the stuff that I've just given you up until now allows you to basically create a random monster spawner or a weapon spawner, right? Because these could quite as easily be different weapons or different pickups or different creatures or whatever, depending on what your imagination can think up, right? So what we're doing is we're using our data table to fill in the structure that we need, okay? And we are basically deciding what we're going to do depending on a setting in our editor, so that our designer can then make a decision. Okay? So, now the point here is, let's say we wanted to create another character. Well, now all we need to do is go in here and create another character, right? Now what we can say is, okay, we need our new Ian, right? So we do E class, we add another one, and we call it, let's say, special, just for it to be something completely different. Okay, save that, go back to our class. We can now create a special, and it's got 200, and it's got 200, and let's see if we can get, let's put that one in for a laugh, right, and see what it is. So that's it, we've done it. That's how powerful this is once you've got the basics. Now, as I said, you can expand this, you can do your hit points, you can do your stuff, you can link the speed to the character movement speed in your character, you can do all that stuff, right? So basically I'm showing you the basics of how to start this off, right? But we've got our base character, right? Now remember, we've got a character movement and we can set this up. So we could basically set up the run's maximum speed, right, to come off this variable here, right? So it directly influences the actual character, right? I'm not displaying that here, but hopefully you've extrapolated what I'm getting at here, that you can actually, you know, take this off and then add it to part of this walk speed or whatever. You can then, obviously, you can expand your structure to include AI controllers, right? That it will automatically associate the controller. You can do it with animation blueprints so that it automatically adds the correct animation blueprint to the, you know, to the right skeletal mesh. You can do all of that. I am just showing you the simplest of tools that's going to get you started, right? Because everybody will take this. If they understand the concepts here, they will take this and go, wow, I can do anything with this, right? But the point is that you'll create the code that basically fills out the rest. Okay, but it really is as simple as this little bit of code, to create it either randomly or select it within the editor and then fill in the rest. Okay, so basically what I could do is I could grab this in, right? Then I could max walk speed. I could set it, and then I could set it directly from here, right? So I could do something like that, right? And that's going to directly affect this character. Now obviously it's already directly affecting it by the mesh, right? But hopefully you'll get the idea that we're not talking about one thing, we're talking about everything, right? Every single thing here within this we could change depending on our struct and our data table. Okay? So we could literally change everything about the walk speed, everything in this character movement. We could change it depending on what values we have in our data table. Right? And we could set them up for every single different thing. A wizard, the rogue, the blah blah blah, the warrior, etc, etc. Right? You could have certain characters unable to swim, so you just set it up in your character movement to not be able to swim. Right? You could set the swim speed to 0. Right? So we can literally, now for Jess, if she's still here, if you wanted to do this, all you need to do is a widget that basically they select the enum, right? You show the enums, then you basically run this code, right? This part here. You're getting the particular, basically you wouldn't do it from the, you wouldn't do it from this, or you would, but you would, the widget would set the struct to the correct enum, and then you would run this code, right? So you would run the get on the data table after you've got this value, right? Now in your case, from a character selection point of view, you would do it for a widget, right? Now if you were to do it on another level, all you would do was basically on your character select, you would have the game instance, and then you would have a variable in the game instance where you saved the enum of the character type. Then when you loaded your level, you would just read it back, because the game instance is the only thing saved across levels, and you would spawn this character and run the code, right? And you would run this from your game instance. This would be the game instance enumerator, right, of the character type. So, as I said, the way to implement this is use it in weapon types, weapon pickups, monster spawners, any kind of thing that spawns, and you either want a random one where you select where you did the top one, right? Or if you're selecting it, where you're selecting it directly. Okay? And that is where you get the power of a data table. Okay? Now, as I said, you could do anything with this, and it's really your imagination that is the limitation here. Let me give you an example, right? Say, for example, you wanted your character to be blue. Okay, well, you'd change your struct, include colour, you'd read that back in, you'd pass it to all your materials, and basically do an add of that colour to every single material, and that would hopefully give you a blue hue on every single material. So your character would then start appearing kind of blue. Okay? Now, all that type of thing takes a lot of setting up, but it's possible, right? And as I said, you can expand it as far as you like. Okay? You can have it to do animation montages. So, for example, every character can have a different animation montage for, you know, picking up something. Like a warrior picks up different from a rogue picks up different from a necromancer, blah de blah de blah. You can store all that stuff in your structures and data tables and work off that. Or you can make it random, where you store all the montages for picking up in a data table, and then you can basically load all them into the different animations and then pick a random one. You know, the world's your oyster, basically, once you understand the basics of data tables and how to use them, right? And obviously, because the data tables are all based on a struct, you need to understand structs. So your structs can be basic variables, or they can be static meshes, they can be AI controllers, they can be vectors, they can be anything. They can be montages, they can be animations, they can be, as I said, controllers, blackboards, behavior trees. As I said, it's up to you. Yes, you can do. If you're doing a crafting system, it has to be based on data tables, which means that it has to be based on structs, which is exactly what I do in Groenland. Okay, so I'm going to close this for now, and we're going to open up Groenland. Right, I'm going to run the task manager and shut that down. Right. And I'll show you I've already got a crafting system in Groenland, Mr. Spock. It's already there. Already does it. I've got a crafting system and a cooking system, a storage system, everything. Right, I'm going to show you in a second. And how it works. It works off two different data tables, right? It works off two different data tables. One is the interactive items, which stores all the items and basic information about it. Actually, it might be three tables. It might be, and it's got, like the cooking one was a food table, data table, and it runs off another data table called recipes that basically is a lookup table to say which items do I need and which items do I produce. And basically it stores a number of the items required, that is an array, and and similarly it outputs an array of the items that you've actually made, and I shall show you it in action. Okay, but first, while this loads, I'm going to grab a quick cigarette and I'll show you how it works. And don't go anywhere, guys. I'll be right back. Okay, so any questions up until now? We're going to open up our maps and we're going to go to the test map. Okay. Our test map is the easiest one to basically demonstrate how this works. Okay. It's doing some stuff. Shouldn't take too long here. Come on. Let's be having you. Right, so we have our map. Okay. And this is our cooking station here. This is our crafting station. And this is our storage station. Okay. So once it has done its shadery thing, we can have a look and see it in operation. Okay, so cooking station to the right, the fiery thing. This is our crafting station. This is our storage station. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the steps that you would do in the game if you wanted to eat. Right, we'll forget that just now. Right. So, we take out our bow. We shoot a pig. We run up to it. We skin it. Okay. These are the assets loading in, by the way. That's why you don't see anything. It should be a little piggy thing. Right? But anyway, we can go up here. We can cook. And it gives us the pork recipe. We click it. It cooks it. And it puts our pork into our thing. Okay. Then, amazingly, we can go to our meat, click on it. It's not going to show us anything there, don't worry about that. But we can use it, and you can see that it doesn't feed us. But that's okay, because some of this wasn't quite working, but it was easy to fix. But we've got a load of stuff there that needs to be sorted out. Right? And I think that I had fixed some of it, but it's obviously gone a bit weird because we had to rebuild the whole thing as a base. So I know that these things aren't actually a big deal, but let's have a look. We can go to widgets, right? We can go to cooking, right? And the main cooking is actually wrong, the wrong one, because I actually don't use this anymore. It is actually part of the crafting, okay? And you can look here to see that that's interesting. Okay, so this isn't what I'm looking for. We can go to crafting main. Now you'll notice it says crafting, but I replace all this stuff depending on which mode we are using, right? And it is basically depending if we are crafting or if we are cooking, right? And if we are cooking, we use a slightly different function, which is fill the crafting. And you'll notice that these use DT recipes. If we look in the recipes, we have a structure, then we have a data table, and you'll notice that we're going to have to do the old debug and widget reflector thing to make it a bit easier for you guys to read. So you'll notice we've got a row name with the name of it, and we pass this through on the widget, and we have a link to the main interactable items table. We have an output quantity, then we have a requirements, and the requirements is also linked to the interactable, but these are the things that you require and how many you require. You'll notice here we have a required item number and we have the required item quantity, the time it takes to make it, and for update possibilities, a skill required, right? So I can easily add in here a leveling system, and if this recipe requires a leveling system, we can use that value there. But you can see that the DT interactable table is used, and if we look at the interactable table, right, which is in the interactable items, it is, I believe, here. You can see that we've got water, shield, sword, deer meat, water, brazier, bed, door, goat, dead, goat meat, ladders, crafting table. You'll notice we had the really big deer meat, we had the cooked pork meat, and these are the things that can be crafted, which was number 19. So if we look back and see this one, you'll notice that this cooked pork is item number 19, which relates to item number 19 here, which gives us basically meshes, images, all that stuff. So this is how we pick out the images and the meshes and all that stuff for once we create it, and it tells you the typey thing it is, blah blah blah. Right, so basically when I'm building it, I get the recipes, which are here, etc, etc. Okay, and it's the exact same for crafting. I just use a different mode for that particular widget, and when you go into that mode it changes a few little like titles to, rather than crafting it says cooking, rather than, like for example, these are all food types. When you read it in the data from here, you'll notice that it says food. So for the cooking, we only allow the ones that say food. For the other ones, we allow the anything else other than food, because that's then crafting something rather than cooking it. Okay? And that's how we break all that up. And again, it's all to do with the data table, it's all to do with the structures, etc, etc. Right, now at the moment there's too many things in here, but you can see from here I've got transforms, I've got montages, I've got is static, interactive text, these can go, items given, blah blah blah. But you'll gradually refine it like you do a database to the values you actually need and split them up. But that is basically how crafting works. Okay, I select a recipe, it tells me the requirements, it tells me what you output, the time required, blah blah blah. So that obviously uses a struct, the recipe struct, right, which I can't remember where it is. It's not in here, but you'll notice as well that we have structs for clothing, dead animals, drinks, fires, foods, fuel, keys, ladders, weapons, wildlife, and basically I set all of these up in a similar way to what we did earlier, which is basically read data tables where it's static. Well, I did that in Fabrica Espace, right, where you can create a crafting queue. So basically you would have so you're talking about like a golf swing. You're basically, what you're doing there is just creating like a golf, what used to be like the golf swingy thing, where it goes up and down and you've got to click it when it's in the green zone for a perfect hit. There's a few ways you could do it. Right, you would just do it with a timeline, right? And basically the timeline, you would just get it to repeat, and you would just set an event in that timeline that says able to click, right? So, for example, for the first 0.8 of the timeline, it's set to false, right? You set a event at 0.8 let's say it's a second, at point 8 you set it to be can click, and if they click when it's can be clicked, then basically you've been successful, so you send it out and say I've been successful, right? And then when it's going back down, when it hits point 8 again, it switches it off, so it basically flicks it, right? It's a flip-flop, right? There's numerous ways you could do it. It just depends on how you want to tackle the issue, right? You could have it so that it's got nothing to do with the timeline. The timeline just basically creates the flip-flop and controls the widget to be red and green, right? But the code runs, you can run a function that does basically the processing of it. So your timeline's really only controlling when it's available or not, right? But the timeline's creating the graphics, right? There's multiple ways you could do it. It just probably depends on how you think about it, right? So I could create it, but somebody else would do it, and it would do the exact same thing, but it would be done in a slightly different way, right? So yeah, it just depends. It's not hard to do. All I would do, the first way I would go about it would be to create basically a function, or I'd create a timeline, right? The timeline would control the look of it, but all it would do otherwise is basically set a variable at point 9, or it would run a function, right? And all that function would do was flip a switch to say they can click it or they can't click it, right? But there's multiple problems that you would come across, and the first one would be that you would have to stop them clicking once they've clicked. Otherwise they could just continuously click the button, and then obviously they're going to hit it at some point, right? So you're going to have to switch off and on the clickability, right? So you'd have to have more than one variable there. So yeah, it just depends. There's never one solution to these things. There's many solutions. It just depends on how you go about tackling the problem, right? Which is something that is basically the main crux of any software design, right? If you can break the problem down into its individual components, i.e. what I always tell everybody, making the coffee, split it down into each individual task, then try and solve each individual task, and then if you can do that and then stick them all together, then you've got the solution, right? But on that, guys, I'm going to call it for this afternoon. Hope you've enjoyed that. Sunbuster, Jesse, hope you have learned a bit, and now you are committed to using structures and enumerators, and you see the actual point of them now within a context of Unreal Engine. And if you require any further clarification on things, join the Discord, my personal one, and pop me a message and I'll try to answer best I can. So anyway, I shall be back in 4 hours time, where we can take a look at things. And yeah, so hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed that. check out the description for links to the Discord for the game, my personal Discord. You can message me if you like. What else? Oh yeah, Patreon, my previous game on Steam, Kickstarter preview, and website. So I shall see you guys in 4 hours, and we'll be back at Groenland and seeing what progress we can make. So thank you guys for watching, thank you for the comments and questions, and I shall see you in a few hours. Bye bye for now.